have a story for you. So I like to tell people to speak up, tell their story, show their warts and their riddles. I like to think that I live as an example of a transparent person, that I've made myself public domain. But I have withheld a few things I thought you didn't really want to hear, things I might not wanted to say. It's not always easy. The things that we let in and the things that we let out, sometimes it's complicated. I'm not sure why I shied away from the subject of the time that when I was 10 years old and I watched that man jerk off in his car. I didn't tell you that one. At first I wasn't sure what the hell he was doing. He stretched his body up to be sure to catch my attention. The first time, it was shocking. I walked home from school by myself. I was so scared. And a few days later, I was holding it all in and I told my friend, my 10-year-old best friend, she grabbed me by the hand, she pulled me in her house. We have to call the police, Maureen. Why, I asked. We gotta go get him, you know? They're gonna catch him and they're gonna put him away, in jail. Well, it happened last week, I said. I think it's too late. Maureen, next time you have to tell the police. I thought it was odd that she said, next time. But she was right. There would be a next time. But the second time that this happened, I was prepared. It was a few years later. I was walking with my sisters. I was not sure if it was the same guy, but it was the same act. It was the same exact act. I mean, so unoriginal, right? Saw that last year, guy. Come up with something new. My sister saw it first, actually. She pulled me past the car. Hurry up, Maureen, hurry up. Don't look, don't look, don't look, she whispered. But I did look. I turned around and I looked and I got the license plate. And then I screamed at him, I got your license plate and I'm calling the police, you fucking pervert. I was 12. That was when I still owned my voice. My sister hushed me though and dragged me up the block to our house. And I did call the police, against my sister's wishes. She was really shy and she didn't want to be dragged into it. And they came and they asked us all kinds of very humiliating questions, and then I understood why my sister didn't want to deal with this thing and maybe sweep it under the rug. They told us that the car was borrowed by some guy's son and that he was warned and will be watched. He's not going to jail? The cop smiled and replied, no, not this time. It hurt my brain. I mean, he was a bad guy. Yeah, I got his license plate. I called the police. And not this time, they said? I mean, how many times does a guy get to be creepy, I wanted to ask.
Justice.
But they never asked me if I had any questions. They did tell us that the son felt very embarrassed about the situation. Oh, well, that's too bad. These kind of memories are the ones that float to the surface when I hear other women share their sexual scarring. And it kills me that there usually comes with these stories that weird question of, why did they wait so long to tell? Which is such a fucked up question. Because actually it's an assumption, right? I mean, how do we know they waited? Maybe they did tell. Maybe they called the cops. Maybe they even got the license plate. Maybe their words just left no impact. I mean, that could have happened. The stories that are floating the airways are so hard to hear, and yet they come linking arms with those unhelpful questions. Why didn't they speak up sooner? Why did they not speak up about these unspeakable events? You get the riddle there? I was 13 when I started skating. I loved skating. I hung out up at our local skate shop with my friends. It was owned by this guy, Richard Breitbarth. An older man with a quick wit and a bad comb-over. I have not changed his name to protect the guilty. Richard Breitbarth was the first guy who ever flirted with me and my friends. And we were flattered. It was the awkward stage of acne and braces. He made us feel like movie stars. He gave us quarters from his cash register to play the video games in his shop. It was only a few months into our friendship when he propositioned us. He gave us an invitation to have sex with him for money. I had never even dated anyone before. I was 13. I'm not even sure I knew what sex was. I went to Catholic school. We didn't talk about those things. So I stopped hanging out at the skate shop. But this time, I didn't tell anyone. There was a part of me that couldn't mentally process the proposition. I had thought that we were friends. He had laughed at our jokes. He had given us quarters, and I loved hanging out there. It was the first time that I felt cool, and this proposition was completely disorienting. I felt ashamed even having just been asked the question. And when I thought about it, it began to make sense. I had seen all of these girls coming and going from his shop. The puzzling pieces began to crawl together and reveal a picture that I hadn't been able to see beneath the infatuation of feeling pretty and witty and appreciated. I think they call that grooming. Many years later, I learned that Richard Breitbarth would be murdered outside of his shop. A friend of mine who still lived in New Jersey called me to share the news. She felt bad about it. I felt vindicated. I'm not ashamed of feeling that way. I don't do shame anymore. It does no one good. Plus, the murder gave me faith in that law of cause and effect. Well, judge if you will, but I'm still not apologizing. When I was 19, I signed a contract as a petite modeling agency in New York, and I began going out on casting calls. One of the first places I was sent was this photographer named Joel Schoenfield. Again, I didn't change the name to protect the guilty. Joel was taken by me. You're so great. Why don't you work for me as a makeup artist? What? Really? I always wanted to be a makeup artist. I was 19 at the time. You know, I do my sister's makeup all the time, and I have 5 older sisters. Well, that's great, he said, so just come on in, and I'll pay you $20 an hour. Really? I was so thrilled. I went home to share the news with my sisters. I was a makeup artist making bucks deluxe in New York City. My second day of work, Joel invited me to see his costume selection that would be made available to all the models that came in for their shoot. Before I knew what was happening, he was on top of me on the bed explaining that he was going to give me a massage. I somehow, by the grace of God, wiggled myself free. On the train ride home, I felt sick to my stomach and scared. There was no way I could go back there. I called him from home, and I let him know that I quit. He was furious. He started yelling and accusing me of being unprofessional. I'm not sure why I didn't stop him. I'm not sure why I didn't scream back, "No, motherfucker, you're the unprofessional one." But I didn't say that. And honestly, by that time, I had started doubting myself. Was I being unprofessional? Maybe I should have given him 2 weeks. I was 19 years old and I had no idea that I had the right to tell him that not only was it an unwelcome massage, but it was also not only unprofessional, but actually illegal. I'm sure that part of my silence was based on the fact that I had called the police. At 10, nothing happened. But again, I watched as cause and effect had its way. A few years later, I picked up the trade paper, and Joel had been murdered in his apartment. This was 2 years after my interaction with him. The newspaper read, "Photographer killed in revenge for rape. Shot dead in his West Greenwich Village apartment." I read on to find out the whole horror of the hideous tale. This guy named John, who was 21, had gone to Joel, and he was upset because his girlfriend had complained that Mr. Schoenfield had raped her. That's what it said in the newspaper. And can we just stop right there? Complained that he had raped her. That's how it read in the newspaper. That's right. That's a problem, isn't it?
Yeah.
You complain about the temperature when it's cold. You complain when a waiter is late bringing your food. But a woman doesn't complain about being raped. It's the type of wording that makes it hard for people to find their voice and speak their truth. "Oh, I'm sorry to bother you. I mean, I'm not usually a complainer, but I was just raped. I know it's an inconvenience." The newspaper did say that Joel had a history of abusing female models who posed for him, regularly luring young women to a studio through newspaper advertisements and promising a career in the fashion industry, like a makeup artist or appointment booker. History of abusing female models. They were aware of his history. Maybe he was being warned and watched too, because we know how well that works. John's 19-year-old girlfriend had answered a newspaper advertisement the year after I quit. Joel apparently proposed that she perform secretarial duties in lieu of paying for her portfolio. After 3 days of work, the girlfriend told the police that he raped her. They said that they had received several allegations of sexual abuse by Mr. Schoenfeld. Several allegations of sexual abuse, but nothing happened to put a stop to it, until John went to the photographer's studio, pulled a handgun out, and shot the photographer once in the head. and then spent 16 years in prison. He went from being a college kid to a criminal. But while he was there, and I like this part of the story, he got his degree and he worked as a counselor, an HIV counselor. He helped other inmates learn to read and write, and when he got out, he started a nationwide program for high school student dropouts. I like that part of the story because it lets me know that there's still good people, good men in the world who will take the fall for 2 decades to make sure she knows she was heard. As for me, I don't take quarters from creepy comb-over people anymore. And I walk the world with a sneaky suspicion that you don't really mean what you say. And I find that I have a tendency to repeat myself because I'm not really convinced that you can hear me. And I still don't roller skate. And I never did become a professional makeup artist.